to like I only share like facts with people.
You could sit on the toilet at 11:59 p.m. taking a poop, wait until midnight, and it would be the same crap, different day. Or you could just listen to this podcast episode and get the same effect. It's always the same thing with you, Trisha. You're all about taking accountability until you're the one who has to take accountability. Let's dive into the podcast. In the beginning, Keemstar tells Trisha that he doesn't think that they really hate each other. Trisha then essentially says, I wouldn't say I'm pro Keem, but I like talking to those who I disagree with. Trisha, are you pro Ethan talking to people you don't like David Dobrik? I doubt it. Trisha has responded to the notion that she would explode if Ethan had one of her enemies on his podcast by telling Ethan to go ahead and have them on.
If he had David, if he had Jason, if he had, have them on.
As if this wouldn't make Trisha upset, like Ryland hosting Jeffrey on his podcast did. Trisha even said Ryland should take that podcast episode down.
The least he could have done was, like take down the pod, because I brought up this podcast, this stupid one,
But don't worry, guys. Trisha retconned ever saying that to prove the point that Ethan hosting David or Gabby is totally fine.
When Jeffrey was on Ryland's podcast, yeah. Was I hurt? Yeah. Was I gonna say anything? No, I don't own Ryland. I don't own Shane. That's a business move. That's,
Trisha also said that the enemy of your enemy is your friend. The enemy being Ethan Klein and his enemy being Keemstar. Is Keemstar actually your friend now? Because that's what that expression says. Keemstar says Ethan will never hop on Keemstar's podcast because Ethan will not put himself in a situation where he knows he's going to lose. He also says that's the same reason why the last episode of Frenemies never aired, because Ethan is a wuss. Trisha says yeah to that, co-signing that Ethan is a coward. Trisha then basically said, Ethan doesn't talk to me personally because he's scared I'm going to air everything online, but I think it's better to talk to someone. Trisha never denied she would air Ethan's business. Trisha just said that it was better than nothing, which is not true. Ethan can talk to other people who won't spread his business. Why would he talk to you when talking to you is risky? Trisha then calls the inability to admit fault Ethan syndrome. Trisha is then like, at least I admit I screw up. Sure, buddy. Back to Keemstar's podcast. Trisha denies being a troll, which is funny because that's what Trisha's career is built on. I don't know if she was trolling us when she said she wouldn't be upset if Ethan had David Dobrik on his podcast. Here's another interesting thing Trisha said.
Drama is like the only way to like get views for me.
That explains why Trisha's here. Then Trisha casually brings up abusing Moses. That's disgusting. This is the main reason I believe Trisha has not changed, much less for the better. No accountability was taken for hating Moses. In fact, Trisha's so unaccountable about this that Trisha freely and unashamedly expresses that no one was supposed to know about hitting Moses.
Because there is a bruised picture of Moses that's so embarrassing, which Ethan brought to light, I was so pissed on Frenemies 1. I was like, no one was supposed to know about that.
Also, Ethan wasn't the one who brought Trisha's abuse to light. Moses' friend actually leaked a pic along with some DMs they exchanged. Ethan just brought more attention to it, but the picture had already seen the public light. No one's talking about this. If the roles were switched and Moses hit Trisha, no one would stop talking about it, but since the victim is a man in this case, nobody cares. It's sad. Trisha mentions experiencing sexual abuse from a teacher at 6 years old. That's awful, but it doesn't excuse how Trisha's trauma has hurt other people. The biggest victim we know of being Moses. Anyway, Trisha compared what that teacher did to what David did to some of the people in his blog, which I see as an extreme comparison. Comparing David Dobrik to a child predator is not a good comparison at all. Keemstar says David has privately apologized to Gabby Hanna and some other people and asks if Trisha has received an apology from him. Trisha says no and had no idea that David gave anyone any private apologies. This is my opinion. I don't think Trisha would accept David's apology no matter how good it was. I just don't see it happening. The conversation continues with Trisha saying David took zero accountability and hasn't changed because he filmed one of his friends being drunk. As long as the friend is fine with being filmed, I don't see the problem with this specifically. Banks brings up the possibility that David's friend consented to being filmed drunk, and Trisha's only counter argument is they're cool with it until they're not, which no crap. Where is the line then? Anyway, the fact that Ethan was patient with Trisha on the Frenemies podcast was brought up, and Trisha agrees. Trisha then talked about being very mentally ill and getting triggered easily. Trisha gets triggered when people say you're fat, Trisha. Sounds like you need to be in therapy, Trish, and if you're already in therapy, you need to stay in it. I'm tired of today's notion that the environment should adapt to us as opposed to us having to adapt to the environment. The world can't accommodate your triggers. You need to resolve your issues because that's what adults do. Then there's more hypocrisy. Trisha's all friendly with Keem's girlfriend, now ex, even though not even a week earlier, Trisha was condemning their relationship and saying that the age of consent should be 25.
The legal age should be 25.
Trisha then has the audacity to half ask how this was blown out of proportion while being the one that was blowing it out of proportion. To put the cherry on top, Trisha says, when Keem says he wants the world to see his girlfriend, now ex. Pretty hypocritical. Trisha, before you hopped on the podcast, you said that you wanted to confront Keemstar about his girlfriend's, now ex's, age.
This whole thing started with me coming for Keemstar's relationship, and I just thought talking about it on a bigger platform.
Now that you're face to face, you're real quiet. Then Trish, you said that the issue is not consensuality, when last week you implied that 20-year-olds cannot consent to being in a relationship with 40-year-olds. Back to the podcast, Trisha admits to projecting her own bad relationships on Keemstar's girlfriend. This is possibly all linked to the perceived attention from an older guy Trisha got from that predatory teacher. Trisha claimed to be just commenting on something. Just commenting on something seems to be implying that Keemstar is a redditor for dating another adult. Keemstar brings up the strike YouTube gave the H3 podcast channel. Ethan made a video basically screwing a Keemstar puppet. The video stayed up. Keemstar saw this as very unfair because if he or anyone else would have made the same video, YouTube would have gave them a strike. He said that he's all for Ethan bullying and harassing him as long as YouTube lets him bully and harass Ethan back. Keemstar alleges that when he was tweeting pics of horses at Ethan, presumably comparing them to Ethan's wife, YouTube told him to stop doing that. Keemstar made a Twitter video asking Team YouTube how Ethan is allowed to get away with making a video screwing a puppet of him. He tagged the CEO of YouTube as well as Team YouTube, and then Ethan got a strike. It wouldn't have been fair for Ethan not to have to follow the rules. He should have been happy he got away with it for some time and then taken the video down. He didn't do that though, despite that being very inappropriate for YouTube. People are outraged at Keemstar for causing the strike, but Ethan shot himself in the foot in my opinion. He probably knew that that video wouldn't fall within YouTube's rules, still posted it and left it up. YouTube's policies are trash, but we all have to follow the trash policies, so does Ethan. Keemstar has accused Ethan in the past of snitching to Susan. Keemstar's not a snitch too by his own definition. Trisha tells Keemstar, why do you go after people's looks? And Keemstar's like, I don't know, I just like talking mess. That's all the criticism Trisha gave Keemstar in this episode. Didn't confront him about anything else. But guys, I mostly criticized Keem. Shut up. Trisha says she's changed for the better, which Trisha mentions being scared of Gabby Hanna. I don't care. Trisha claims to only share facts with people. That's not true. Banks says there's a way to dishonestly tell the truth, which is true. Situations can be misconstrued by leaving out information or saying things in a certain way. Banks talks about how Trisha and Ethan made a false comment about him and Mike being involved in SA. Trisha claims to have misspoken about the situation. However, Trisha never cleared the air about it. I couldn't find any apologies, no retractions, even though it was a huge misspeak. Fake SA allegations should not be taken lightly. Anyway, that's all that stood out to me in this podcast episode. Bye.